We are more than halfway through the NFL season, and it's clear who is contending for a Super Bowl and who is on to 2025. We know teams like the Chiefs, Lions, Bills, Steelers, and Eagles are all competing and legitimately have a chance to win the Super Bowl, and other teams have a shot as well, of course, but you get the point. But for every team like the serious contenders, there's several teams that are not competing for a Super Bowl and are in a very difficult situation. And in today's video, we will be breaking down the 4 worst situations in football. We will break down how they got here, how they can get out of their current situation, what is realistic for them at this point in time, and how they can go from winning 5 games or less in a season to winning double-digit games and to legitimately compete for a Super Bowl. The teams we discuss in today's video will not have an easy rebuild ahead of them, and in some cases it's going to be very difficult to get back to the top. And there is a lot to break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are 2-8 after a 35-14 loss to the Saints in Week 11, and they make today's video for a couple of reasons. Everyone knew Deshaun Watson wasn't the answer at the quarterback position after about the first 2 weeks of the year, and there was already a lot of concern with Deshaun heading into the 2024 season. This team failed to score 19 points in any game with Deshaun as the starting quarterback in 2024, and he was injured in Week 7 and is done for the year. I know the easy thing is to bring up his salary in 2025, which is currently slated to be $72 million, and this is per overthecap.com. Obviously, because the Watson contract is guaranteed, all the Browns can do is push the money down the road and continue to wait for the league salary cap to go up, and the percentage of the cap with that would go down. And with TV deals, gambling deals, and everything else, the salary cap will continue to go up, but at some point, the bill comes due. Not only is Deshaun currently scheduled to make $72.9 million next year, but the Browns also have other big cap hits like Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Grant Delpit. I didn't include Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward within that because you guys probably already knew that, and those guys are really good at what they do, and you have to pay for talent. Not only that, but those two specifically are not net negatives relative to what they're making. But Jack Conklin has played in 8 or more games just once in the past 4 years, and I will acknowledge that there is a chance he plays double-digit games this year, but he's not a player you can fully rely on at this point. He's very good when he's out there, but unfortunately that's half the battle with him at this point. The Browns would save $15 million by cutting him or trading him post-June 1st, but here's where part of the problem lies for Cleveland. Whether it's with Jack Conklin, Joel Bitonio, or Wyatt Teller, they're old up front. All 3 of these players will be 30 or older at the start of the 2025 season, and Bitonio will turn 34 in October of next year. Cleveland has really good players on their team, but they went all in with Deshaun, expecting him to be the missing piece, and obviously we know how that turned out, but with 3 offensive linemen north of 30, and with what I would imagine is a rookie quarterback from the 2025 draft, obviously those guys are not going to be around when that quarterback is in year 3 or year 4, when they would have a chance of seriously competing with the said quarterback. So I think the Browns are in a situation where they're going to have to trade at least one, if not multiple offensive linemen and take what they can get in a trade, because they're going to need to get cheaper across the board due in large part to the Deshaun contract. As of now, Joel, Wyatt, and Jack have cap hits of $14 million, $14 million, and $19 million in 2025, and the Browns are currently $11 million over the cap, and again, this is per overthecap.com. They went all in for a player who didn't work out, and other parts of the roster now needs to be figured out. And with what I would imagine is a rookie head coach or a new head coach, and multiple new offensive linemen up front in what is a really talented division in the AFC North, this rebuild is going to be incredibly difficult because 2025 is almost certainly going to be a wash, and I think we can comfortably say this is one of the worst situations in football. Next up is the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're in today's video for a couple of reasons. One of my biggest concerns for the Raiders heading into the 2024 season that dates all the way back to the summer, and really even after the draft for that matter too, but it was emphasized during the team preview video, which was released all the way back in August, was not having enough offensively. Not enough offensively to beat the Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals of the world, and obviously the Bengals have had a tremendous year offensively. Defensively is another story, but my point is, forget those 3 three offenses for a minute. Not those teams, but anybody to win enough games, to put up enough points on the board to win 8, 9, 10 games, and that was my biggest concern for the Raiders heading into the season. Rolling into 2024 with Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, now they have Desmond Ridder, and then at the running back position with Alexander Mattison and Zamir White, to me was always a recipe for disaster, and not surprisingly, the Raiders are 2-8 through 10 games, and they play the Broncos, and then at the Chiefs and at the Bucs in their next 3 games, and I'll be honest, if they do not beat the Broncos in week 12, I would be pretty surprised if this current 6-game losing streak they're on doesn't slide all the way to 9 games, which would culminate in a 2-11 record through 13 games, and at that point, I think Antonio Pierce would be on the fast track to getting fired at season's end. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight or emphasize is that I really liked the Antonio Pierce hire when it happened, and I don't want to have this revisionist history and say, well, they should have hired this guy or should have hired that guy. I liked the Antonio Pierce hire for a couple of reasons, and it boiled down to a couple of things. Number one, the Raiders played so much harder and they played with so much more effort and intensity down the stretch of the 2023 season than they ever did with Josh McDaniels, and also the fact that Max Crosby was vouching for him heavily. For clarity, I didn't look at the situation and think, okay, Max Crosby likes AP, therefore I now like AP as a head coach, and the main reason that I liked Antonio Pierce was from what we saw down the stretch of the 2023 season for the Raiders, specifically the Christmas Day game against the Chiefs. You saw the energy, you saw how everyone played, you saw how everyone bought in, and Antonio Pierce could really get the locker room going, and everybody was smoking cigars, and it looked like a complete culture change from what we saw from Josh McDaniels, and that was the main reason that I liked Antonio Pierce. In a division where you have Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, you are almost going to have to go skull and crossbones and defensive, tough, hard-nosed mentality to ultimately win the division, which the Raiders have not in a long time, and that was the main reason why I like the Antonio Pierce hire. What I did not factor in was the fact that they were going to roll into 2024 with Gardner Minshew and Alexander Mattison as their starting quarterback and running back, and legitimately think that was going to work, and that was the biggest problem that I had with the Raiders heading into the season. Now, I will say, out of the 4 major teams we discuss in today's video, I think the path for the Raiders to get back to competing, not necessarily for a Super Bowl, but for a wildcard spot, has the potential to start in a big way this offseason. Per overthecap.com, they have over $100 million in cap space, and they can free up another $10 million by releasing Gardner Minshew this offseason, and I don't think they're going to do the second one, but they can free up another $11 million by releasing Jakobi Meyers. Again, I don't think they're going to release Jakobi Meyers, but I do at least want to acknowledge that they could free up $21 million by releasing both Gardner and Jakobi. And this free agent class, whether you know it or not, is really loaded, and they could bring in guys like T. Higgins and Chris Godwin, and because they will presumably have over $115 million in cap space by the time March rolls around, they could pay those guys $45 million per year, total, not each by the way, and still be fine. And they would also be able to get another running back, and this running back class is pretty loaded as well. Aaron Jones is a free agent for reference, and there's several other free agents too. So the Raiders can pretty quickly bring in a good running back, maybe even 2 running backs if they want. They can bring in 2 good receivers this offseason, and Stephon Diggs will also be coming off of a torn ACL, so there's a chance they could bring in Stephon Diggs as well, and I don't think they're going to bring in all 3 receivers, but my point is this team is almost inevitably going to be selecting a quarterback in the top 5 picks, and they can do a lot for their rookie quarterback, whether it's Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, or Jalen Milroe, to have a chance to set them up for success. So while the Raiders' rest of their 2024 season is probably going to be very boring and not fun to watch at all, even if you are the most diehard Raiders fan, I really think there is a clear path for them to succeed and a clear path for them to sign a couple of big free agents and to set their next quarterback up for success, much more than what they did heading into 2024. I know 2024 has been a very tough year for Raiders fans. It's been rough from the start, and aside from the Ravens highlight, it's been a very down year, but I do think out of the 4 teams we discussed in today's video, that the Raiders have a clear path to competing to get back into the postseason. Next up is the Carolina Panthers, and there are several reasons why they're in today's video. Where to begin with this franchise is like throwing darts at a dartboard, as you can start with the owner, the poor play on the field, or the front office. But one of the biggest reasons why this rebuild is going to be interesting is because they're going to need a new quarterback unless Bryce Young plays out of his mind over the last several weeks of the season, which I would welcome, as I do wish the best for Bryce. But at this point, I don't see a reality where Bryce Young is the opening day starter for the 2025 Panthers. I would like to note he has played a little bit better recently, but as of now, it's not enough to commit to another full season of Bryce Young. Quarterbacks are always going to be in demand, and while the 2025 quarterback class is not as talented as the 2024 quarterback class, there's going to be multiple quarterbacks selected in the first round, whether it be by the Raiders, Giants, maybe even the Saints, and maybe even the Panthers. But the Panthers are in a very tough situation because their defense right now is awful. They are dead last in points allowed per game, as they are averaging 31 points allowed per game on the season, and they've allowed 26 or more points in 7 of their 10 games this year. And whether the quarterback is Bryce Young or Joe Burrow, who is absolutely playing at an MVP level, you are not going to consistently outplay a bad defense. They have allowed over 100 yards rushing as a defense in every game but one this year, which was to the Raiders back in week 3, who are also one of the worst teams in the league. But one of the biggest problems with the 2024 Panthers, well, one of many, is they have zero pass rush. And I know the initial thought process is probably something along the lines of, well, they're down in a lot of games, so they don't have as many opportunities to rush the quarterback as other players across the league. And that's technically not wrong, but unless you are a Panthers fan, I would be surprised if you can name 2 pass rushers on this team outside of Jadeveon Clowney. Their current top 5 leaders in pressures are a 31-year-old Clowney, interior defensive lineman A'Shawn Robinson, 2017 Dolphins first-round pick Charles Harris, former undrafted free agent Deshaun Williams, and tied for 5th is a third-year player in Jaden Peavy and a free agent they signed this year in DJ Wanham. And if you were wondering how many pressures each player has that's 5th in pressures in PV and Wanham, well, they have 5 on the season. I know the easy thing to do is to dunk on the Panthers for trading a lot to go get Bryce Young, but this is a bad football team all around. They also don't have as much cap space as you would think, and a lot of that can be attributed to a $31 million cap hit in 2025 from offensive tackle Taylor Moton, but they can free up over $13 million by releasing both Adam Thielen and Miles Sanders this offseason. They also have a first-year head coach in Dave Canales, and I like the hire at the time, but this is a tough situation now because they have to replace nearly an entire defense, and obviously losing Derrick Brown hurt this team in a big way, but even if they had Derrick Brown, they weren't going to win 11 games. But having to find a quarterback in a not great draft class and also having to replace a near entire defense is an extremely difficult task for anybody. If there is one positive thing to say about the situation, it's that they're not in a division like the Raiders, where they have the Chiefs, Chargers, and hell, I'll say it, another team on the rise in the Broncos to compete with. But the Carolina Panthers more than have their work cut out for them over the next few off seasons, because this is not going to be a one-year turnaround. The Jacksonville Jaguars are in today's video for a couple of reasons, but I think it starts with ownership and goes down from there. I have noted numerous times that I'm not a fan of general manager Trent Baalke, and for reference, the Jags are just 30-64 since he took over as the team's general manager, and even if you want to exclude the 2021 season, which I think was a complete embarrassment to the Jags organization, if you take away 3-14 from his 30-64 record, he is still just 27-50 as the team's GM, which is downright awful, and the 2021 season was entirely preventable in terms of almost ruining Trevor Lawrence, because I think everybody hated the Urban Meyer hire from the start, and the whole season was embarrassment after embarrassment. But the Jags are in today's video for a couple of reasons, and it has a lot to do with decisions Trent Baalke has made over the years, whether it was selecting Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson, despite nearly everybody thinking that Aiden Hutchinson was a better prospect than Trayvon Walker, and Hutch over Trayvon was not a CJ Stroud over Bryce Young take. I mean, everybody thought it. with the exception of the Jags. But Trent Baalke has also made poor decisions in the draft over the years, and he's received very poor value on his selections at times, and there's times in the draft where I pay attention to what the Jags are doing, because there's always a possibility of being on the edge of your seat and them drafting a player that I have graded in the 4th or 5th round within the top 50, and they did that last year with defensive lineman Mason Smith, who hasn't played very well for them, by the way. But the Jags roster overall isn't elite by any means, but what I want to emphasize with the 2024 Jags and why I think they are in a bad situation right now is, despite the Jags roster not being one of the top 2 or 3 in the NFL, I don't think it's anywhere close to a 2-9 record through 11 games, and I think that's a direct reflection on not just Trent Baalke, but also the coaching staff, and I think it's a matter of time until Doug Peterson, Press Taylor, Ryan Nielsen, and everybody else is let go. And one of the reasons that I included the Jags in today's video is when you look at their roster. Again, I don't think it's one of the worst in the NFL by any means, but whatever coach comes in next is going to have to tie themselves to Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor obviously recently signed a very hefty contract extension, and again, good for Trevor and his family, but they're not going to have the luxury of selecting a quarterback of their choice, and they have to pretty much say, all right, Trevor, you are getting paid over $50 million per year, buddy, let's make it work, and that's what's going to happen whenever the next head coach comes in. Now, I completely acknowledge that 2021 was a complete disaster for Trevor and really the entire Jags organization, as he was throwing to guys like Laviska Shenault, Laquan Treadwell, Dan Arnold, and James O'Shaughnessy regularly. Those weren't his wide receiver 5, 6, and then tight end 4 and 5, and they just happened to have a string of bad injuries. Those were guys Trevor was regularly throwing to back in 2021, and Trevor, of course, had the several game stretch in 2022, but here we are a couple of years later, and obviously Trevor hasn't lived up to the enormous pre-draft hype, and the only way he was ever going to live up to that type of hype was to have the type of career that Patrick Mahomes is currently having, or to have the type of career that Peyton Manning had, which included 5 regular season MVPs, and that's not fair for Trevor Lawrence or for anybody to have to live up to. But my point is Trevor is now getting paid a lot of money, and Trevor is not a top 5, 6, or 7 quarterback. Yes, he has flashes at times, and he looks like the player he was touted to be coming out in the draft process back in 2021, but that's not who Trevor is regularly. And we obviously know the conference the Jags are in, whether it's the Chiefs, Bills, Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, Chargers, and even in the Jags division, the Texans. This is not an attractive situation, not as attractive as it would have been a couple of years ago when they had Trevor Lawrence, the prospect, not Trevor Lawrence, the 4-year pro that's only thrown 69 touchdowns in 4 years. And I don't know if Trevor's going to come back this year, and I wouldn't blame him if he didn't, but the point is, this situation is not really attractive, and not every team can go get Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. And to be honest, if I were Ben Johnson, I would rather stay in Detroit another year and work with Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, Penei Sewell, Dan Campbell, and everybody else, than I would try to go work for Jacksonville and to go try and bring that organization back to relevance in hopes that they can somehow turn it around, when I know I can just stay in Detroit where I have everything comfortable and I can compete for Super Bowls year in and year out. So if you were the next hotshot coordinator and you have a chance to coach the Jags, why would you want Trevor Lawrence to be the guy that you're going to have to attach yourself to for your coaching career? This is not the NFL of the 90s where, hey, we can wait it out, we can go 4-13, we can go 5-12, we can miss the playoffs for a couple of years. The NFL's coaching careers, lives, are shorter than ever before. And when you factor all of this in, when you factor in that you have a quarterback that you had to pay, because why would you get rid of Trevor Lawrence in hopes that you could draft somebody that's as close to as good of him? Were you really going to get rid of Trevor Lawrence to try and draft a Jalen Milroe or a Shedeur Sanders in hopes that he could be as good as Trevor Lawrence? No. So they were kind of cornered into paying Trevor Lawrence, and now they're going to be cornered into hiring a head coach that has to love Trevor Lawrence. And keep in mind, Trevor Lawrence entering 2025 is not going to have the same appeal that he had all the way back in 2022 or even entering 2023. So when you look at the Jags from afar, I think the situation is going to be really difficult to bring them back to relevance, and I wish whoever takes over as head coach and general manager, because Trent Baalke is almost going to be shown the door as well, I wish them the best. That's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 42% of people watching are subscribed. It helps the channel tremendously. Please check out the draft grade videos. They are out midway through their rookie year, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.